As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to dress like a gangsta. Okay, I always wanted this hat. How bad do I look? I cannot pull off this hat. I got this hat for professional development. I'm going to be teaching a class on hip hop music and hip hop culture. And I'm going to be teaching obviously about gangster rap and about music of the 90s. And I remember very specifically being in middle school, seeing the first kid to get one of these real deal Raiders hats with the script Los Angeles Raiders, just like Eazy-E wore on the front cover of Easy Does It. And I remember thinking, I really want that hat, but I know I can't pull it off. I'm just some kid from the suburbs. Well, now I'm just some adult from the suburbs, and I came up with a reason why I needed to finally get myself a real deal Los Angeles Raiders hat. It's not a real deal, it's a remake. The real deals cost a couple $100. Ridiculous. I'm wearing this hat partly in honor because of the lesson. So what I'm doing, if you've never watched this part of the channel before, I usually do new music reviews, but I am creating a class on rap and hip hop. And part of creating a class is making a syllabus. Okay, that's fine. Teaching the classes, that's fine. But I also have to find things for these students to read. And I don't want to just well, first of all, there's no good single textbook that will work. And so I have to find a whole bunch of materials, videos and movies and books and articles, and put them all together so they have something to do for homework, so they can have a basis that's more than just listen to this music. Isn't it fresh? Isn't it dope? So what I'm going to be talking about today are two separate works on gangster rap. Okay, we have Original Gangstas by Ben Westhoff, and we have The History of Gangster Rap by Soren Baker. All right, so this is what I'm going to be talking about. I'm not just going to be talking about these books, although I am going to tell you whether or not you should buy these books if they are necessary for your hip hop library. But I'm also going to be talking about sort of what is it that I expect my teachers to learn. I can take this off now, I think. I just can't pull it off. It hurts. I mean, you're about to witness the strength of street knowledge. So when I'm thinking about how am I going to be teaching gangster rap, especially N.W.A. and Los Angeles, and especially Compton in the late 80s and early 90s. I'm going to really focus things on the central question of what to even call it. Because these books both call it gangster rap, but a lot of the people who created the music originally called it reality rap. So I'm going to be sort of putting that forward to my students, and I'm putting it forward to you. What's a better title? And what is the meaning of the two different names? The name reality rap implies gangster rap as a revolutionary and even anti-establishment form of music, which goes against the values of, goes against institutional racism, institutional power, to the police, to the FBI, to the CIA. When you call it reality rap, it is revolutionary. But I think when you call it gangster rap, you do something else. You make it something of conformist music. By that, I mean gangster rap in its values as seen as early as Schoolie D, as early as Ice Cube, is very materialistic, very much based on the belief that you need to get you, right? You need to take care of yourself. You are number one. Everyone else is nothing. You have to make the most money off the most amount of people. And if everyone else starves, that's fine. In that way, it embraces Reaganomics, embraces right-wing beliefs. Okay, that's the great contradiction of gangster rap, is that Reagan's policies partly created the material conditions that led to gangster rap. And then gangster rappers, while rebelling against those conditions, ironically supported them, completely supported them. And that's the world that we live in now, where rap music is largely just a pro-capitalist enterprise, at least in the mainstream. So those are going to be the larger themes I'm going to be asking my students to understand. All right, I'm going to be talking about that, going through lyrics, looking for evidence. And as always, if you're in college, just know this. Anytime a good teacher asks you, is it this or that? They are always looking for the answer. It's both, always, with no exception. All right. So, hey, I started advertising this class to my college, which I do not represent. I do not represent my college in any way. I'm just sharing this with you as an individual. But if you do take this class, just know whenever I say, is it one or the other, it's both. I'm going to be using gangster rap in particular as a way to get us out of New York. So much of hip hop is based in New York. This will be our first way of seeing the regional differences in rap. Be a way to talk about censorship. And it'll be a really good way to talk about how hip hop has been co-opted and used to support the power structures, which in theory should be questioning. But as always, it is both questioning and subverting at the same time. So let's go through these books. Let's start off with Original Gangstas by Ben Westhoff. A lot of strengths to this book. This book is amazingly fun to read. It's what, 377 pages, if I remember correctly? Yep, I got it right. You could bring this to the beach. Okay, you could just bring this to the beach and read through it. It's written very smoothly. So, it starts off with the story of Eazy-E, talks about how he was a crack dealer and how his personality led to becoming a rather bad person who had a good record label. But it takes you through the whole way. It's a very, very smooth narrative that's primarily centered on Eazy-E and Tupac, but it's very careful to also spread out to the people around them. A particularly good section on the formation of N.W.A, and in particular, what I'm going to be, really using this book for partly is in describing the importance of the song "Boys in the Hood." Part of a job of teaching a music class is picking the right songs, like the right songs that are going to communicate the right things to the students. I only have 50 minutes 3 times a week to communicate these things. I don't want to spend the whole time just putting on Straight Outta Compton and being like, that was a good album. So Boys in the Hood communicates everything. And so this is great because both these books contain good explanations of how the song was created, what it means, what its significance is. Some things I learned from this book that I didn't know. It was originally going to be called Rock House Records, as in Crack House Records, which pretty wild. That was almost the name. Pretty good stuff about the dissolution of N.W.A, about how Suge Knight made his way in. They're very clear with the nature of Ice Cube, how he was always sort of a poser as a gangster. And then now seeing what he's become as a mouthpiece for the Republican Party, he was maybe even a poser as a revolutionary, which hurts me to say because his music is some of the best, most revolutionary hip hop that's ever been written. I don't know. Maybe it's just live long enough to see yourself as the villain. Maybe it's a situation like that. The weakness, I would say, is there's maybe a little too much emphasis on the business side of things. I would like maybe a little bit more fleshing out of people, and a little bit more sort of about crack, like more about the context. There's some good stuff about the context of crack, the context of Compton and the crack epidemic. But so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of like look through the book. Here's the bit where they talk about crack on pages 4 through 6, and sort of, well, actually, what I'm going to do is something a little bit. Yeah, so it's good. It's like maybe 5 or 6 pages about like the war on drugs, the nature of police, and they sort of go through the stories and they talk about Dr. Dre and how he started in his early days and the World Class Wrecking Crew. The whole thing is written so enjoyably, with a great emphasis on how much pre-NWA music made by NWA members was anti-gang and anti-criminal, which again goes to the concept that it is maybe, as FD Signifier would say, kayfabe, right? Which is to say like pretending. There's really a lot of emphasis on Ice Cube as just a storyteller. And the presence of Jerry Heller is quite interesting, the manager for Ruthless Records. He always comes across in everything you read as a hero and a villain at the same time, which is how all the members of N.W.A come across, as heroes and villains all at the same time. I suppose this isn't that interesting. They do go into Suge Knight and the truth of how he actually behaved. It seems like he was not as coercive as the stories are, but he was more coercive than was legal, and certainly than was ethical. There's a particularly good section here, right towards the middle, where they explain the sound of G-Funk. And I'm really going to be using that a lot. The Funky Worm, the song by the Ohio Players, was like the song that had that high whining sound. And the way they describe it, the signature sound, it's found on page 214 if you're following along with me, really is quite a good explanation. And as they get into the G-Funk era, they're also talking about Tupac. And again, it's a very good depiction of Tupac. Maybe a little too much emphasis on his death and who did it, but I get that that's what people are really interested in. Something I learned about Notorious B.I.G. According to this book, and I have no reason to doubt Mr. Baker here, Notorious B.I.G.'s biggest influence was King T, which if you're a fan of my channel, I did a video about the album Act a Fool, saying it was the best rap album of the 80s. Like, I think it's better than Straight Outta Compton, better than Easy Does It. produced by DJ Pooh, rapped by King T, before he just became a rapper who rapped about being an alcoholic. And it turns out that his flow was the most influential on Notorious B.I.G., which is a good example of the kind of stories that he tells to really emphasize how sort of fabricated the East Coast, West Coast divide would be. So what I want to do now is I'm going to share with you the questions that I wrote for this. So it's not just enough to just have students read. You have to have reading questions. So I divide them up by sections. So here's a little bit about Compton, how Nixonian programs were undone by Reagan. Help the middle city, the inner city, and just sort of all the things I just talked about. These are questions. A little bit of information on Ice-T, but Ice-T is going to come up more in the other book more. You kind of see the kinds of questions that I'm asking. Lots of questions on Tupac. Tupac is always so popular. And then I sort of try to, so what I do, if you haven't seen my previous video, what I'm doing is I'm not having them all buy the books. What I'm doing is I'm scanning in certain pages, and I'm scanning in those pages. Wait, stop share screen. Okay. No, but where's the thing I'm sharing? Yeah, there you go. So I'm actually just going to go in and scan all these pages and upload them and have them read them and have the questions, because I can't ask my students to buy every book. But the question is, should you buy this book? Yes. I mean, if you think you have a couple weeks, depending on how long it takes you to read, to read a very engaging book that basically reads like a novel, even though it's based on true things, I highly suggest this book. Which then leads us to The History of Gangster Rap by Soren Baker. Now, this is more of, look at the format here, right? So you see there's lots of graphics, lots of images, which aren't super well printed, so it's a little bit difficult here. So it's a little bit more of a bathroom book or a coffee table book or kind of kicking around book. So, if you like just sort of reading a couple pages or reading a little infographic and then moving on, this is quite good for that. What this does really well is it decenters gangster rap around Los Angeles. So often, gangster rap is just seen as being synonymous with Los Angeles, but of course it's not. And one thing that I love about this book is it really goes into detail about Schoolie D and the importance of Schoolie D, man. How the hell did he get so cool, man? It really goes into what Schoolie D did, how he did it, how he had to draw his own album covers, how he's just in the middle of nowhere in Philadelphia, completely inventing gangster rap. And then this is great because it goes right into Ice-T, where Ice-T actually called Schoolie D to get permission to record 6 in the Morning, which was considered the first gangster rap song. And then how Ice-T influenced Dr. Dre to move away from making, kind of shiny suit or, weird kind of, because at that point in the 80s, LA was mostly known for more electro-based hip hop, a little more kind of bouncy and synth-based as opposed to the hardcore stuff. So, you really get a clear picture in vivid writing with lots of great quotes. Schoolie D, Ice-T, N.W.A. It just reads really nicely and reads really clearly. And it really goes into what makes Ice-T such a great character. And I mean, Ice-T is so amazing and so frustrating. Look, it's even got a little infographic on King T, but that's the Triflin album, which is one of his bad I like to drink too much alcohol albums. Seriously, dude, don't make being an alcoholic your thing. Who wants to read about a drunk? You just I smell things, But it has nice little images like this. It spends a lot of time discussing MTVs, too much time. One of the weaknesses, way too much time talking about MTV and how it interprets rap. It's just not quite necessary. A good section here on N.W.A. This is a great quote about N.W.A. They considered N.W.A. Ice Cube was N.W.A.'s lyricizer. Eazy-E was the group conceptualizer, and Dr. Dre was its musicalizer. I suppose Yella and Ren were just the other geysers. Some great things about this too is it puts everything in. Okay, one of my problems is the social context of the music is not geographically located enough. So when they talk about the 80s. They don't talk enough about Philadelphia and the actual Philadelphia that created Schoolie D. There's enough stuff about the actual Compton that created N.W.A. But still, they do sort of put general context. And then they do break away and they'll explain, like on this page here, they describe the diversity of rap when N.W.A. came out. That there wasn't just like, there was just like one mainstream. There's like pop rap and there was conscious rap and there's all these things happening here. But where things get really good, I think, is on page 75, where they start talking about the Ghetto Boys. I don't know anything about the Ghetto Boys. I'm from a little part of the world called New England, and we were totally open to listening to rap from LA. But beyond that, like, I never thought to listen to music from Houston. So it really talks about how lame Rap-A-Lot Records was in the beginning until eventually they figured out how to really do the gangster rap thing. And Jay Prince, this real visionary, was able to put together these different artists, and just how, you know, like I was talking earlier about like how to teach songs, like how to teach this stuff. So I don't know enough about the Ghetto Boys. All that I know is, why'd you shoot me in the eye? You should have shot me in the body. I don't even know what that means. I just, that was like a meme amongst my kids before, my friends. Before memes existed, we would just say funny stuff to each other back in the 90s. My generation, this is what we did. So like that was what we always, that's all I knew about the Ghetto Boys. Until Office Space obviously took Damn It Feels Good to Be a Gangster. But here, he has like a page and a half on the song Do It Like a G.O. So like that does it for me. When I get to the section where I talk about Houston, I know that I have a song from the first Ghetto Boys album. I can contextualize it with Jay Prince. I can contextualize it with the influence that LA had in showing that there was more hip hop in the world. And it's kind of scandalous lyrics that are also kind of political, and everything that I want. Like that's what I want. Like that's the perfect stuff. It's a little bit political, a little bit anti-political, a little bit misogynist, because we are going to be talking a lot about misogyny in rap. More about that next week. So really, it's very useful. A very useful lesson there. Sort of more talking about Bush. This has a good section here about Eazy-E meeting with George Bush. I am going to spend a lot of time, again, talking about how gangster rap supports the dominant paradigm, right? How it supports poverty and the wealth gap. That on a micro and macro scale, that's what gangster rap's message is. The wealth gap is good and right. I wish it weren't true, but it is. Then there's this. I'm a collector, which you may not know that about me, but I have maybe the world's biggest collection of Chewbacca collectibles. I have a lot of interest. I was about to say I'm a weirdo. This is just somebody with every copy of death certificate in every single country. And this right here just made my day. I love this stuff. Man, I wish I could. I love looking at runs like that, like all different countries and images. Like, I love it. Love it. Absolutely love it. So, you know, and then it goes on and talks a lot about No Limit. I was around when No Limit was getting big, but I didn't understand what they were. I really like how they explained that No Limit really just was just gangster rap, like G-funk gangster rap, but just with a Southern accent. Really lots of emphasis too on the fact that Percy Miller of No Limit spent a lot of time in the Bay Area while living in New Orleans, and E40 would rap in New Orleans and spent a lot of time, would rap in the Bay Area and had a lot of contacts in New Orleans. So this weird sort of like connection, which I never knew about and must really have influenced what Northern California and Louisiana music sounds like. Talk a lot about the beef between East Coast and West Coast, which I am going to have to talk about. I am going to have to absolutely address that because that's one of the things that really interests them. He goes on and on about the Up in Smoke tour, which is cool. It's a little bit weird because like I saw that tour. I went, I saw Snoop Dogg replacing Eazy-E playing N.W.A. and Eminem, and that was really cool. I do like how it sort of, I think like he sort of bailed on the idea of like this is the summative moment of the gangster rap movement. I think if he'd waited a couple of years, he could have, or he can add an addendum on here that really the Super Bowl show from last year was the crowning moment, where all the stuff that's in this book and in this book about the crack epidemic and F the police and all of the questions of whether or not it's reality music or gangster music or whether or not it's conformist or revolutionary, it's all to see with these African American giants of culture performing their music, which once was censored by the FBI. Like it's pretty interesting. That'd be a pretty interesting moment. It's funny because he's sort of like, both of these books are maybe 5 or 6 years old, and they both sort of end with like, who knows what's up, but maybe Kendrick Lamar. I mean, he's not really a gangster rapper, but that's maybe the future. I think they didn't do a good job of predicting the future, because obviously gangster rap is really alive, but they didn't have the foresight, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't have had the foresight, so who am I? I'm neither of these guys. But to predict that gangster rap was going to move on to the internet, that gangster rap was going to be Chicago and Orlando and all that garbage that you see on Trap Lore Ross, that there's going to be like this push for authenticity and ostentatious shows of wealth while also displaying the decay and the neglect in our American cities would all move on to the internet. So it's not going to be Kendrick Lamar, someone who doesn't go on the internet. It's going to be whatever, some dude from O Block who's smoking his op. I'm sorry, did I sound lame when I said that? What if I said it like this? Smoking his op. See, now I look tough. This hat is way too tight, by the way. My head's a little bit too big for hats. Now, I'm not done. So I've also got some pretty interesting things. So I'll quickly show the questions. No, these questions here. The gangster rap questions. So, asking about Schoolie D, 6 a.m, and iced tea, the Ghetto Boys, No Limit. Not too many questions there. Should you get this book? I think having both these books is a great idea. I would prefer this one over this one if you're planning on reading and learning. If you're planning on having just a cool book to have kicking around, I would get this one just because you can just kind of read it. It's a little bit more for the internet age, where you're able to just like look and like there's a little box about Interscope Records and you can read that. You can get all that information in here too, but sorry, my head just broke the back of the hat. I'm not lying. Panium cranium here. But I'm not done. So not only am I going to have them read these books, but at the same time, I'm going to have them watch some documentaries on YouTube. So I want to just share those with you as well, because why not? They're here. I don't know how long this video has been, but you can kind of sort of see more of my thinking. So I made a little, okay, so it's sharing this, gangster rap videos, a little private playlist that I made here. There's this, I don't know who it is, Hezekiah.
These lyrics could...
It just has this great website with just tons and tons and tons of stuff, which really has a lot of great material from the early 90s and late 80s, all about whether or not gangster rap is bad, what it has, just all these great talking heads talking about that. So I don't actually think, in a similar way, there's a documentary about gangster rap from 96, a lot of stuff about Tupac and the paradoxes of Tupac. I don't think that the censorship thing is interesting as most of the people who write about it do. So most people write about the censorship question in hip hop and they spend too much time with it. I don't think it's that interesting that the N.W.A got stopped by the police at that concert or whatever. It's sort of interesting. But like you just sort of say it and then you move on. So I do think it's more interesting to just, instead of telling them about it, show them the environment. And I highly suggest you sit through the Hezekiah compilation that I showed you. I'll include the links in the description. It's just crazy. It's just crazy to see all of the hysteria that was up at the time. And I was alive during that time. I was alive and desperately hoping to look like Eazy-E on the front cover of Easy Does It. I mean, I'm I mean, the hair's a little bit different, but beyond that, they're basically, indistinguishable. So that's really good. Having that, just using YouTube for that. And then finally, there is a 2008 documentary, which I don't know how long this will be available. So
a nice handful of
it's called The World's Most Dangerous Group. It is, whoops. It is narrated by Chris Rock, who of course starred in CB4, and so like I want to tell you that you learn a lot more from these books about the founding and the dissolution of N.W.A. In reality, the documentary says most of it. Now, it does need to be contextualized, and I would say you get 80% of the story from that documentary. So I am going to have them watch the documentary, maybe do a little bit less reading from these than I thought, at least for the section about N.W.A. Interestingly, Soren Baker is in that documentary. He did participate. So it's at least legit on that side. So there you go. There's my review of some gangsta rap books, some reality rap books. It's not about a salary. It's all about reality. So, tell me, like what other stuff do you know about gangster rap? Do you know of any other books, any other videos that you find interesting? You have helped me already so much. Like, I'm not joking. I've gotten so many great recommendations from people about how to teach this class, assignments I could give. This is new. There's a lot of hip hop classes that are out there, but I don't know of any hip hop classes taught by people who have a very active, like living fan base on YouTube. So like I can get a lot. So you can help me give my students the best possible experience. The question is, am I going to wear this hat the entire time I teach this unit? You're damn straight I am. I did not spend $30 on this hat to just wear it for this video. It's professional development. All right. Well, then, until next time, I hope you found that interesting. Tell me in the comments more advice that you have. And, last thing I'll say, both of them tackle Snoop Dogg quite well. It's the one thing you can't understand if you are not at least 30 years old. Snoop Dogg was the most dangerous, scary person on planet Earth. Snoop Dogg scared the piss out of me. I thought he was the coldest possible killer ever. I never would have imagined him selling socks and beer and banks and everything. I never would have imagined it. I'm going to be doing a whole section in the class about the defanging of African American stars, like where you have their strength and their turning their personality, their blackness and their strength and their virility and turning it into a joke, thereby one could say castrating, defanging, de-weaponizing their power in the culture. So Flavor Flav, a voice of Black Power, is just a joke. Ice-T, one of the first people, someone who actually got censored for saying that you should kill cops, even though he did it in a heavy metal song, not a rap song. And it's a heavy metal question, not a rap song, not a rap question. So I'm not even going to talk about Cop Killer because it's a heavy metal song, because just because he's black doesn't mean it's not heavy metal, because black people can make heavy metal and white people can make rap. Anyways, that's not the only time he talked about hurting the police. Ice-T is now most famous for playing a police officer. Ha ha ha. Snoop Dogg was a guy who was literally on trial for murder and a gangbanger and all that. And now he's Mr. Funny, Shizzle my nizzle with Martha Stizzle. So that's another thing I'm going to get into. A little bonus there for those of you who didn't click off. There's the camera. I always stop recording.